Hey guys, so this time around I have another army discussion video for you, and it's going to be focused on my Vampire Covenant army. You can see it in the picture. The actual army list includes just a slightly different model setup, but this will do for the video. So it's an army that I have been optimizing for I think half a year now. And I'm now at the point where I'm quite comfortable with the list, and it performs also quite well, also in tournaments. So let's get into the list. So you can see that I have a Necromancer general, and then Vampire Count on a Spectral Steed, Vampire Court-shaped Battle Standard Bearer, big block of skeletons, small block of skeletons, the zombies, Court of Damned, Dark Coach, Great Bats, Phantom Hosts, Vampire Knights, Farkalak, Winged Reapers. And I'll go through each of these choices one by one, just to have you, just to explain why it's in the list and what the role is. So first we'll just move on to the characters. And as characters we have obviously the Necromancer. He is the general in the Vampire Covenant army. So for Vampire Covenant, if your general dies, then everything in the army except for the things with Vampiric have to take a discipline test. And the amount by which you fail the discipline test indicates how many wounds you get on the unit. And against these wounds you don't have any armor save, any Aegis save, anything. And this continues every single round until either it's the end of the game or until you're able to nominate another master for your army. And this master is a character with either Vampiric or a user of the Avocation lore. So all in all, my Necromancer is the general. My opponent has to get this model in order to make me test for discipline. Once he does that, I still have two characters left that can take over. So in terms of me crumbling down, that's quite okay, because this Necromancer, he's in the army, so he can just lay back, and yeah, my opponent can hunt him down. But honestly, it's a 230 point character, and well, you need someone to be your general. Yeah, it's nice to have at least one Necromancer in your Vampire Covenant army if you play with skeletons, because you can raise these before you can increase them over the starting limit with a Necromancer. So yeah, that's basically why he is in the list. Also to give me the second arise, so that you can raise back wounds in your army with two different characters. And I think that also is quite essential in a Vampire Covenant list. So then we go to the next choice, so the Vampire Count on Spectral Steed. This is an expensive choice. He's kicking in at 720 points. He only has 3 wounds, so you're paying more than 200 points a wound. Yeah, he is very expensive, and back in the day you had to just, if you had a Vampire Count, then it was going to be the model with the highest discipline, and it would have to be a general. Now he doesn't have to be the general anymore. His duties are a bit lighter, and his responsibility is a bit lower. So he's a bit of a very expensive throwaway piece. So the setup that I use now, I also looked at Blood of the Dragon vampires, but they do get +2 offensive, and they strike very hard. That's true, and even with the blood powers, they strike incredibly hard, especially the one that allows you to generate extra attacks upon after you have seen how many wounds you deal with your initial attacks. But the question is, against most targets, is this worth it or not? And I chose for the not. So before I played it without the unbreakable will, and in the end you have a character that has 6 attacks at strength 6 with AP 3, and the cursed medallion gives him reroll to hit, reroll to wound against one specific model in the enemy army. So for this one thing that the enemy has that you cannot put this guy up against, you have to reroll to hit and reroll to wound. And the Legend of the Black King gives him a 4+ Aegis save. So in combat with the Spectral Steed, he has a 3+ armor save. Against shooting, he has a 2+ armor save. And he flies, and flying is also quite essential for this character. And then I added Unbreakable Will because I found that sometimes he loses combat. If he loses combat, it's a bit of a shame, because every wound that you lose is a very expensive wound. And then Unbreakable Will makes him stubborn, so that he halves the wounds that he loses combat by. So for example, if I lose by 2, I instead lose by 1. Now this doesn't look very incredible, but the BSB and the effect of the aura effect of the Winged Reapers kick in after this deduction. So if I'm within range of my BSB and I lose by 3, then it gets halved to 2 because you round up, and then the BSB is there to reduce it to just 1. Also for 4 wounds, it just gets reduced to 1 by this way. And if you're in range of both the Winged Reapers and the BSB and you lose by 4, then you halve it first, so you go to 2, then you kick in the BSB, then the Winged Reaper, so you don't lose any wounds at all. So combined with these, it's actually incredibly strong, I think. He's a Wizard Apprentice on Occultism. He will always take Pentagram of Pain because this is his way of just healing himself. I could also get Arise on him to heal himself, but Pentagram of Pain gives you an additional effect, and he's going to be trying to get behind enemy lines anyway. So I think he's quite a vital element in the list, because he makes for the enemy to have to focus on more than just the front. So you disrupt the enemy's army by having something incredibly potent, just flying around over the flanks through the army, and he's also quite hard to catch. So I really like him as a pick. Then we go to the Vampire Courtier. So this guy is meant to last. And there's a lot of people that there was this video by Brasis who made a White King BSB setup, and of course the White King on itself as a cowboy is a very good BSB, because it gave him Dusk Forged, I believe, and also a ward save. Anyway, he ended up with a very sturdy character. But if you're going to have him just around your army, and I think the BSB is also quite a nice addition to the Vampire Count army, because you can just prevent these important wounds on your expensive models. I think this guy is the way to go. So he just has light armor and shield, but he has Destiny's Call, so he goes to a 4+ Aegis, and this is quite important because he has Wizard Adept on Occultism. He always selects Hand of Glory together with that, probably Breath of Corruption, and with the Arcane Knowledge he also has the Hereditary spell and +6 inch range on his spells, +3 inch on the auras. So with Hand of Glory he can cast it on his own unit to go to a 3+ Aegis himself and a 5+ Aegis for the unit. Also, alternatively, you can cast Hand of Glory on the Dark Coach or on the Vampire Count to get them to a 3+ Aegis, which is also insane. And he's going to be in one of the units of skeletons. So he himself has a Legion Standard, the unit has a Legion Standard. So you end up with 2 Legion Standards, sufficient ranks to fill them all. So you have a static combat res of 5 for your ranks, +1 for the banner of the skeletons, +1 for the BSB. So you have a static combat res of 7, which is a lot, especially for an army that can just grind so incredibly well. And the fact that he just has a shield and no weapon upgrade makes him go to defensive 7 against models that do not have higher weapon skill or offensive skill than his defense. So against everyone who's going in and doesn't have ignore parry, you have parry. Against the ones that have very low offensive skill, you have defensive skill 7, so they hit you on 5s. So he's really meant to just stay in the unit and last. Then we go to the core section. So as it is a Vampire Covenant independent army, I only need 20% core, whilst if you take a Bloodline in your army, then you need 25% core, which is another reason not to take a Blood of the Dragon Vampire count on Spectral Steed. So first we see the skeletons, just 2 big blocks of skeletons. Usually one of them has the Court of the Damned in it, and it's nice to have this combination of a couple of characters that hit quite hard, Court of the Damned that hits quite hard, and the difference in size between the skeleton blocks. So depending on the army I'm facing, I can either put 0, 1, 2 or 3 of these choices into either one of the skeleton units. So against very potent opponents in a combat list, I can just put both the court and the 2 vampires in the 45 unit of skeletons, and then this unit will not go anywhere, especially if you cast Hand of Glory on it for a 3+ ward save both on the BSB and on the vampire count, and a 5+ ward save on the court. You might have an opponent that is able to remove the court from the unit, and I also saw once that like 20 or 25 skeletons got wiped in a single round. But usually the unit ends up on top. So yeah, that's a really steady unit if you put everything in there. But for most matchups, having the cord in the 25 skeletons provides it with enough power to become an independent combat unit. And the other unit, yeah, just most opponents can just throw something in there, but just be stuck for the rest of the game. So this 45 unit of skeletons, 46, that's a really good just anvil in the list, and it enables all of the others choices in the list to work without having to worry about the biggest threat in the opponent's army. And then, well, we go to the zombies. The zombies are just there for keeping the necromancer. It's also why they have a magician, so they can still swift reform if needed. And zombies are zombies. Okay, so let's continue. So next on the list is the Court of the Damned. This unit is a very good unit for the price it costs. So it's only 300 points, and it really changes certain matchups, mostly the elven matchups with high agility, causing your characters and also the court itself to strike before these very elite style armies. So with the current meta, maybe it's not really necessary because you don't see a lot of elves on the table. But also other armies, they struggle from the -2 agility and also the fact that there's still 6 strength 5 attacks on this on the court. So just to beef up one of the skeleton units basically, to turn it into a proper combat block. So if you put it in the 25 skeleton unit, then you end up with like a 600 point unit, which is, well, not too expensive still, even for a combat unit. And it has, well, again, just a lot of staying power. And I was looking at the Vampire Covenant army, and there's a couple of units that can provide you with some aura effect or some buff in a certain range. The Court is one of those, and if you start stacking these buffs, it's quite funny. So the buffs I'm talking about are mostly just the Court of the Damned, the Dark Coach March buff, and the Winged Reapers with their -1 on Crumble. Yeah, so then let's move to the coach. The Dark Coach, it's a very interesting piece because people regard it to be a chariot, and I also thought it was just a chariot. But it also has Vampiric on a 3+ with 4 attacks with offensive 6, offensive 6, I believe, strength 5. So it's quite likely to do a wound and get a Vampiric roll on a 3+. And in terms of defense, it has resilience 5 with a 3+ armor save and a 4+ Aegis save. So that is sturdy. That is really sturdy. So I think people should consider it more like a steam tank than as a chariot. So it's in the list for 2 reasons: just to hold up like large infantry units. So units that die quite easily, but that don't have a lot of static combat res, but that might still have quite a decent damage output. That's fine for this coach because it'll just survive probably. And once you get your enemy unit down to like 3 models, then you can grind them out just based on the fact that you have Vampiric on a 3+. Yeah, if you combine it with the Occultism lore, you can just get the 3+ Aegis save instead of the 4+ Aegis save on it, which also makes quite a difference. Yeah, and the buff it provides, the March buff, is quite useful in making your army mobile. So my general is usually in range of the skeletons and the zombies, possibly one or two more units there. And then the Dark Coach takes rest of the marching of the non-vampiric units I have left, so especially the Winged Reapers, to make them just more mobile. Next up on the list we have the 2 Great Bats. This is just easy and simple 90 points to spend to get 1 turn where you don't have to worry about the enemy's big close combat threat. 2 Phantom Hosts, these guys are amazing, and I would really like to have more of these in the army. But I just cannot find the points anywhere. So if you can find the points, please enlighten me. Then we have 3 Vampire Knights with Standard and Champion. And this is still the choice that I'm least happy about, I think. But to have Strength 7 in your list is quite nice. So there's some armies that have... well, there's quite some armies that have Resilience 5 models with like Defensive 4 or lower, and not really a lot of armor left after Strength 7 or no regen or anything. So then it's really nice to just be able to do like 6 wounds in one go, and to have it on a knight unit that doesn't take a lot of wounds back. So for 280 points, I think it's a nice addition to the army, because it's also another scoring unit, which is quite important. And it's also a unit that's quite a bit more sturdy than you might expect. Then we go to the Varkalak. Varkalak's there for the Vanguard and for being just a bit of a prick. So the Varkalak, yeah, in a unfavorable matchup for him is when the opponent has a lot of flaming, because that negates his regeneration save. But 335 points for a model that has Vanguard and has a relatively small base and still has quite a damage output with Hatred and Vampiric on a 3+ is awesome in any way. So as long as your opponent doesn't have a simple answer to it, it's worth it, because it disrupts the enemy's lines just like the Vampire Count does. It reduces the threat on the Vampire Count, and it's still, if it gets into the right combats, which it might because it's very mobile, it still pays or it still makes up for its price. Also, even if it results in your enemy just having to focus on it for like 4 turns or so, then it still makes up for its price. And then to round out the list, we have 3 Winged Reapers with paired weapons. There's a very important reason that there's 3 Winged Reapers. So 2 Winged Reapers, they are not strong enough, because I basically regard them as a light equivalent of the Graveguard 30-man great weapon boss. So this is something that can just deal with infantry blocks reliably. And you might not say it from just the fact that there's 3 Winged Reapers. But they have offensive 6 with paired weapons, so they ignore parry. They have strength 5, they have 5 attacks each in the end. So that's 15 attacks with 3 stomps. They have resilience 5 with 4 wounds each, which is important. So that's it. It is quite a sturdy combat unit, and it can take on quite a lot of units just on its own. And 2 Winged Reapers are not strong enough. I also played around with 4 Winged Reapers, but then the footprint just gets too big because they have flying, and they are quite mobile with 6-inch advance and 12-inch march. But if you take 4 of them, then it becomes too unwieldy. So they, in case they had probably advance 7, march 14, or even 8, 16, then 4 of them would have been great. Now with advance 6 and march 12, I can only reliably play with 3 of them, because you might still want to try and get them a little bit on the flank of your opponent, and with 4 of them that's just not manageable. So that rounds out the list. Yeah, one thing I still wanted to mention is that, yeah, so it has been based basically on my Empire army, where you just combine some buffs, and in the end, on paper, it looks kind of normal. And then once you put it on the table and you start explaining all the rules to your opponent is mostly like, what is this? Because also the Winged Reapers, they still have their aura of -1 crumble within 6 inches. So that's where the Vampire Knights also enjoy. The Varklak likes it a lot. The Phantomhost like it a lot. The Dark Coach likes it a lot. And of course, the character on the Spectral Steed. So I believe I found a way to combine quite a lot of good stuff from the Vampire Covenant army book together, and I'm quite happy with the list. If you have any comments or any suggestions or any improvements, probably my opponents won't like any improvements to this list, but still, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for listening, and see you the next time.